Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Buck Stops Here, Special Talks Edition. So I get invited to do talks all over the U.S. In some cases, they're Zoom talks. In some cases, they're in person. I've got a talk at a conference this week. This is being recorded in March of 2026. And one of the challenges is that I never give the same talk, the exact same talk twice, especially when I'm talking about tools and artificial intelligence, simply because those talks, things are moving so quickly in the AI ecosystem right now that those talks are quickly outpaced by events. Yet I don't want those talks to go to waste. I'd like them to show to a wider audience, even if people wouldn't go to the talk. And in some cases, I'm able to record the talks, but in some cases, depending on the software and systems, whatever it is, I'm not able to get those talks to the people out in the audience who might want to see them. So today, I'm giving one of my talks in the form of the podcast. It's going to be a little more casual than my official talk. But I'm going to go through the talk I gave. I'm titling this episode as All You Need Is Toasters. And that's not derogatory towards any AIs. You'll see when I talk about it. But the official name of the talk was AI 20 The Road Ahead, Scaling Laws, Agentic Realities, and the Power of Agnostic Workflows. And I thought this talk was important because it can give people an idea of where we are, where we are not, and kind of what is actually happening in the ecosystem, where we're actually at, and give people truly a snapshot of what's actually going on. So this talk is about 30 to 45 minutes. It's about the length of a podcast. And so I'm going to kind of cover everything that I covered in this last talk and put it in an episode format. But at the same time, I didn't want to do a disservice to the audience where I have AI read you a blog article or just crib that or used 11 labs to, populate an avatar of me or a talking head. I feel like these talks, I personally don't like the AI driven talks where we actually have an AI read you a blog article. For most people, they aren't as interactive as what's actually going on. And at the same time, I find them to be a bit like, I don't know, they kind of put me to sleep. Maybe good in that kind of environment, but not anything else. Without further ado, this is AI 2026, The Road Ahead, All You Need Is Toasters. And I'm going to talk about scaling laws, what agents are, what they are not, and really why you need to really get into what I'm calling agnostic workflows. So kind of to start this out, I want to talk about kind of where we are right now. So I gave a talk on this back in 2024. If you look back through the stuff, maybe on the pod or elsewhere on davidmaples.com, you can see this. I gave a talk and I said in really September, October of 2024 that we were kind of hitting the wall when it comes to scaling these machines. Scaling AI is just a brute force approach with more compute in your data center would lead to much higher, much thoughtful, much better intelligence. And it turns out that just it wasn't just directionally right. It was absolutely right going back in time. Now, that doesn't mean algorithmically by basically finding smarter ways to do things with the AIs that we wouldn't find a better path forward now, which we have started to find. But just the brute force approach of throwing more data, more compute, and making the chatbot smarter and smarter and smarter. And what we're starting to see is marginal increases between generations the AI get released. Now, I know people who want to flame the show or whatever it is, you may come back and say something to me like, well, but they're releasing things a lot faster. Yeah, but we're not getting 10x improvements between models. Even generationally, we're not getting 10x improvements. We're getting, 30%, 8%, and it's in the margins. Now, those margins do add up. They are additive. But they are not necessarily multiplicative. And personally, not a popular belief. I'm a fan of Jan LeCun. I think LLMs might actually be a dead end. Doesn't mean they're not incredibly valuable, incredibly powerful. We can get a lot of benefits from using them, but I don't think in the long run, this is how we actually get to AGI and these things actually understanding the world. This may not age well. Maybe 10 years from now, when we get some kind of AGI or whatever it is, maybe we go back and say, oh, David Maples was such an idiot. I'm totally open to that. I have been wildly wrong before, but I've been directionally correct for really the past almost decade on this kind of stuff. So, and then, it's March of 2026. Everybody is all awash about agents. We saw a Claudebot, which got rebranded to MoltClaw in January. Then we saw MoltBook, which Meta just acquired. And everybody's about like agents, 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 agents. If you're a small to medium business, I think the agentic reality is not yet. Maybe next year. We are not there yet. For most of you, you're going to burn through an incredible budget in tokens. And by the way, that cost will come down. But the reality of it is that getting these agents to do a lot of very valuable stuff is still in that. Now, look, if you want to eat glass for 4 to 6 weeks to get your OpenClaw running, it's a cool hobby thing. I really believe that the agents right now it'll move much faster than it did for digital 3D printing, not digital, but 3D printing. But if you got a 3D printer in 2010 or 2015, as a hobbyist, that was really an act of love. It was not you put it in the microwave, you hit cook and you go. Even now, they still require a lot of work. I do think setting up an OpenClaw machine, if you can find a Mac Mini where you live, it's sold out in a lot of cities, but if you can find one and want to set that up and go towards that, more power to you. It'll probably teach you a lot more about architecture than you ever probably knew before. That being said, I think that can be a useful endeavor. I don't think for any small to medium business right now, it's where you should be putting your time. If you're on the cutting end, so it's hard when you're in the kind of AI, I'm not going to say bubble, but when you're in that ecosystem, you think everything is Silicon Valley. You think everything is living in San Francisco, and when you live and breathe it, and what you realize is that in big corporations, they're really just scratching the surface of implementing these things. They've been very, very slow to adopt. There's a question about the value on it. Obviously, value in software has really outstripped a lot of the value in everything else, as we've seen the growth of Claude coming out really as the coding agent du jour of the day. But what we are seeing is a real growth towards agnosticism. What that means not being wed to any one single model. And the reason I think this is incredibly important is, as we saw the German professor who basically turned off the history in OpenAI and had built all his scheduling and scaffolding in OpenAI for 2 years, he lost everything. There's no way to recover it. So one of the challenges is if you go tie yourself to the Anthropic wagon with Claude or OpenAI wagon with GPT or any of the other models out there, I think what you're really seeing is a real challenge if something changes, if someone decides to charge more for tokens. The reality of it is, and what I've been doing for the past year and a half, is I use a workflow where I use multiple different agents depending on what I need. And actually, I have a way set up to where I have the other agents check each other on their work, on their math, etc. Not to just reduce the level hallucinations, but to kind of catch those before they happen. But I think it's much, much more important to look at agnosticism now. And one of the sponsors of the pod, by the way, is a piece of software we wrote called EasyPrompter.ai. If you go to EasyPrompter.ai, you can sign up for that. And it's a system that lets you use the chat interfaces. It has a lot of other features in there now. And we integrate with 27, 30 models, something like that. And whenever there's a new model coming out, we integrate with them very quickly because you're going to find, as your kind of your daily driver for anything you're doing, you're going to find that there are different models that you like for different activities. It's the way it works for anything. You're going to discover some that work for you and some that don't. Going forward, where we really are in 2026, I want to talk about kind of the state of AI. So these are predictions I'd kind of made in 2024. I just want to go ahead and say this. It kind of keeps me honest about it. So what we had back then was we had a situation where I said that 2025 is going to be year of AI, agentic AI version 1.0. This is a slide that I just updated for this talk. I said the 2026 agents were going to mature. We're going to see agentic adoption. And I said that, it was still a ways off. Still just not there. So 2035. Now, here's how I updated things for 2026. I think timelines got pushed out. Year of Agentic AI version 1.0, you could say that 2025 was an alpha copy, not even a 1.0 version, like it didn't largely work. I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think that you're going to see in 2027, you're going to see massive software agent adoption. These systems will undoubtedly get better. And I think in 2028, you're going to start seeing more agentic adoption and robotics. I think this might be led by kind of the military industrial complex. They're kind of pushing the envelope on that. And AGI, I think it's still 2035, and I think we need a different paradigm to reach it. I don't think it's through the LLMs. I just don't. So again, welcome to be wrong on that, but we'll see. I still think that, I've said this for the past 3-4 years that the AI you're using today is the worst AI you'll ever use. But what we have seen is that, progress plateaued in brute force, as I said, and we're moving from chatbots to kind of agentic AI. So innovation being needed in the modeling. So here's what we're running into. We're really running into a situation where we have this S-curve problem. Innovation is needed to take us to the next level. So we basically hit this top line kind of ceiling, for lack of a better term. And what happens is as you reach that, there's a maturity point. You basically have to, as you hit that window and you have to find a new way to move you forward. So for example, there's a thing called Moore's Law. This idea that, compute doubled every year, the cost that the power required got dropped by half. And the reality is that Moore's Law was more of an observational directional thing than it actually was. And it's not a law. It's not even a theory. It literally was an observation, what we saw happening in commerce and the marketplace. And we still hold to that. But it turns out that Moore's Law basically stopped working for memory in the early 2012 or 2013 or something like that. So it really wasn't still happening. There's also a particular thing with hard drive capacity, hard drive size. It would double, I think, every 18 to 24 months. I don't remember what that corollary law is called, but the idea was it was an observation. And what we're seeing with AI is kind of the same problem, is that we had this idea, it was observationally correct, directionally said, hey, we double compute every time we move up a level. There become all sorts of challenges as we went up there. So what we're looking at is, I'm not saying that we won't continue on a trend line that takes things upwards. What I am saying is that we require innovation. So innovation in January of 2025, we had the reasoning models. DeepSeek came out and kind of shook the foundations of the AI world. Right now, you're kind of seeing some of that with the agentic things. Again, I kind of feel like that's extra high end for most businesses to figure out how that works. And I'll talk about how I think people actually need to be approaching this right now and what that actually looks like. So there may be an AI bubble. Winter may be coming, to crib from the famous George R. R. Martin series. I'm not 100% secure on that. I do think that we've gotten rid of some of the other bottlenecks. I said a couple of years ago, and this is not just me, this is in the industry. They've said that, there were a lot of bottlenecks to reaching, AGI, and they were chips, compute. So getting chips, getting energy for your systems, and information were kind of the top. Those were the top three. And then algorithms are the fourth thing. So it's like algorithmic advances, chip advances, energy challenges, and so there were four things. There were chips, algorithms, energy, and information. Those are your four things that were causing real limits or bottlenecks on where AI could go. Now, I think algorithmically, the LLM is a question mark now. And I keep talking about Jan LeCun because he just raised $1 billion for his own AI lab, and he kind of thinks it's a dead end. I just think, and people in these labs all have different arguments on this. It's kind of funny. You're starting to see the markets react in different ways to different parts of it. It does not mean that the LLMs aren't incredibly powerful, but we may still be headed towards kind of an AI winter. That absolutely may be where we're going to get to at some point. But regardless of where we're at right now, is that chatbots still provide the most control over what you're doing, and the agents are still new, but both represent untapped potential. The way businesses are using these things is in a very cautious manner. They really haven't put them in. They're not really sure how to do it. Now, what I want to talk to about this is I want to talk to people about business friction, removing business friction. This is kind of almost a holy grail of sorts for Silicon Valley. It's like, oh, we need to remove business friction. We need to get rid of any friction in your business, the friction between you, your customer, between you, the end person. And the thing is that this is totally wrong. Friction is incredibly important, both in making your business go and in making it stop. For example, a car cannot move without friction. You need friction between the tires and the ground to move you forward. But just as important, or probably more important, is the friction on your brakes to make you stop. So Formula One race cars have the most expensive brake systems on the planet. They cost about $200,000 per car. And the reason they have those is that they can take a Formula One race car and take it from 186 miles an hour down to 0 in about 4 seconds. This means you can head into a blind turn at 200 miles an hour and not crash and go on to oblivion. The reason that's so very, very, very important is it lets you go very, very fast. It lets you be nimble, lets you need to do these things. And I think the people who talk about this and say, oh, remove business friction. Well, where do you move business friction? What are you trying to do? And I think one of the big challenges you have, and I've run into this all the time when I've done consulting and I talk about the buck stops here, is what works for them may not work for you. If you are a small company that's worth, $1 to $5 million a year, or you're a startup that's got $100,000 in revenue, the answer for you is very different than what it is for a multinational conglomerate. What are the risks to you if you don't have the brake systems in place? Can you absorb the crash? And the answer is, for most people, the answer is no. And the challenge I'm talking about here is there's a difference in not having brakes at all and not having reasonable governance. And so what the challenge we're running into is that a lot of people are like, oh, let's use, and this is where agents are a challenge. Even people, if you go to any of the OpenClaw meetups, they'll say things, they'll admit to you in these meetups like, well, I wouldn't put any of my personal information in there. Like, if you're not okay with your personal information being thrown out on the internet, probably don't use this. Why? So that goes doubly so for businesses, unless your information should be out there. So the big thing is, I tell people, this is why I say it's all about toasters. You want to buy a toaster, not a robot kitchen. The people selling you, because hype, and we have entered the grifting golden age. That is my term. I'm branding it. We are in the golden age of grifting. Most of the people, if you look at your Twitter, your X feed, or you go to LinkedIn right now, everybody says, let me pitch you an ad. In the past 24 minutes, I built a new AI, agentic reality that changes everything. I'm now at $300,000 average recurring revenue per month on this basis, and I built this 15 minutes ago. If you'd like to have the free copy of my thing, click below and copy toaster, and I'll send you my full agentic pitch deck on what happened. Really? If it were that easy, everyone would be doing it. And what everybody is doing is that bullshit grifting thing you're talking about right now. I will sell you on my $69 course. That doesn't mean some of them don't have value, but most of them do not. You're buying the same $69 course that they bought from 100 other people. And that's what you really got. So the way they're pitching it is like, oh, it's the world of tomorrow. It's Walt Disney back from again. If you want to ride those rides at Disney World, that's what it is. It's that you ride in here, and this kitchen not only makes you food, it'll go to the grocery store and shop for you. It'll tell you what your kitchen needs to do. It will do everything for you. My gosh, this is a lie in March of 2026. This does not exist. Does not exist. But a lot of people are selling it. It's only $69. And you start to say, it's only $69. I mean, they've only taken me out of $69 if it's not real. They'll probably provide, $69 is not bad. I could try spending that money. There's a famous quote by P.T. Barnum. I can't remember it right now. Oh, that's right. There's one born every minute. It's the idea that you can get these things for nothing. Now, I think there's incredible things you can do, but most people need to be building toasters, which is pretty amazing. You can use AI right now using software to build some small function and pieces that you can use on your kitchen counter, and it'll make toast for you every single time. And you should say, my God, that is amazing. Because you couldn't build a toaster a year ago or 2 years ago. But you also need to make sure that your toasters are not plugged into an outlet that's going to burn the house down when you do it. So what my thought for most people in March of 2026 is you need to be building toasters. Build something that has a small, one functional role. Don't try to do everything, and don't try to automate it all at once. It leads to paralysis. The biggest thing you can do right now is moving quickly. And I have another talk I'm going to give people that I have to give this week. It's called Being Small is Your Superpower. That will be released, I think, next week. You can look at generating these small applications or these toasters or finding solutions to solve one business activity at a time, and you can actually move your business really forward. So the next one I'm going to talk about, this is something I thought about recently, was the plumber versus programmer. And the thing about it is that I wanted to look at the plumber versus programmer. How can a blue collar business benefit for artificial intelligence? A report came out from Anthropic, and it showed like what businesses are most at risk and most exposed to artificial intelligence. And it turns out that the software application in particular are the most exposed to AI right now. In fact, Anthropic supposedly, now we don't know if this is true or hyperbole, But supposedly Anthropic uses their own AI to help build the next versions of AI. And by the way, this is kind of the holy grail of artificial intelligence. It's called the recursive self-improvement loop. The idea with it is that I built the machine to build the machine that will come after me. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy supposedly was going to build the new computer in the future that would build the computer that could solve the question to life, the universe, and everything, not just the answer, which is what the first computer did, which is 42. That's a little bit of a nerdy segue right there if you haven't read Douglas Adams' a famous tome, but it's very important to know. But for plumbers, it's how can they start using technology in their business to remove friction? It's not about automating everything, but there's a lot of things you can look at. And here's the thing. When I talk about these, you want to apply breaks into the systems. You want to know if it's booking calls for you. How does that compare to your human activities? Do you have a backup in place? That's a set of breaks. So for example, there's a certain portion of people right now, there's a big backlash in the United States of America against artificial intelligence right now. So you want to make sure that you still have a human backup. Myself, I work in these things, but when you get the AI robot on the phone that you cannot get through, a lot of people don't want to talk to that. And their tolerance for using your company is worse. We literally have built some software pieces to analyze phone calls using AI for clients. And our clients who are using some of these AI phone answering bots, people will literally say, I'm never going to do business with you do this. A company who uses AI to answer our phones, I'm never going to do business with you. Now, once everybody does that, that'll probably change. But right now, that is one of the challenges in the business. That's an opportunity for some businesses. And for others, it's a real problem. So the Formula One mindset, though, is that the 2026 shift is that AI is no longer a chatbot. So what you need to do is you need to think about how do you do this and move things forward. So you can do, kind of reactive auditing, which there's a couple things here. There's the human on the loop versus human in the loop. And people for a while, everything has been human in the loop. I actually think for most small businesses, human in the loop is still the way you should do it because you cannot survive the crash. This is maybe not the perfect way of doing it, but in the loop is a seatbelt or it's actually still having a human driver in the car. Human on the loop is literally analyzing the crash after it happens, which if you can't afford another Formula One race car, and if you're a small, medium business, you can't. So I always tell people, would you give a new hired intern access to the bank accounts or your corporate books the first day on the job? And if the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't do it either. When we build software, we have backups of backups because the AI will occasionally delete a database. Search this online. You will see the stories of this are legendary. And by the way, most of us who've been pushing kind of the edge on what you can do with these systems have all had some kind of catastrophic colossal failure. Hopefully we've all had parachutes or backups to, cover the fact that the airplane just disintegrated around us at 30,000 feet. But perspective gating is what I consider the Formula One brake system. It's thinking about what your exposure is to each of these different parts of the technology and putting those in place before you hit that wall. But either way, you still have to move these things forward and you have to look at how is the best way to handle these issues. Now, the one I'm going to go to now is called shadow AI. This is why you need to do this. This is the reality of what the world is looking like right now when we start talking about what shadow AI is. So AI is suddenly good enough to handle your, dispatching and invoicing, supposedly. Varying gains on that. But if you've got a cutting edge system, you can probably do that. So, and they're getting smarter. Their inference is scaling. That's the models are getting smarter. But the shadow AI is a massive part of it. So here's the thing. Over 68% of employees are using free AI tools on personal accounts, and more than half of those people are passing sensitive data into those systems. So here's what shadow AI is. Okay, this is people putting information into these other systems. With 67% admitted to using unauthorized AI tools for work. The number is actually 68 from a newer slide that you just saw. 41% uploaded confidential documents to free AI platforms. 23% had no idea their inputs were being used to train models. Most of the people did this out of the genuinely good intentions. And 89, almost 90% believe they were just being efficient. So what happens is there's a thing called data exfiltration, which is that when you put data into the public models, it enhances the models, and it's actually a data breach for your company if you're supposed to keep that information proprietary. Your intellectual property, you're leaking that all over the internet. And what it's really coming down to, you've got compliance violations, GDPR, patient records, that's HIPAA in the US, massive problems. And there's no audit history. You don't know when this stuff went in, how was it revisioned, what versions of it. There's no definite legal strategy on this. And so the reason this is really, really important is that what's happening is that in the United States v. Hepner, it's a case out of the Second Circuit out of New York. And so what happened there in that court case, the court said the defendant had put some information that their lawyer had given back to them and had put stuff into these public chat models. And the court ruled in that case that it was completely discoverable. There was no expectation of privacy. You'd lost your attorney-client privilege on that case. Now, by the way, there's another case that just came out, a competing case, that says, well, some of the stuff might be protected or not. So the argument is either Hepner was overly broad in the ruling, the other one is way too narrow. I think we'll land somewhere in the middle. But the reality of it is putting your confidential information or possibly your legal information into these bots might turn it into something discoverable by the other side. And the thing that I want people to realize about this is that people are not literally stealing the stuff through brute force and phishing anymore. That's not true. They are still doing that. But a lot of your data is literally leaving through your browser tabs. It's literally walking out your front door every single day. Half of the people of that 68% who said they've used these models are putting confidential information in there, and then you are losing. It's just going out the front door. You literally do that. Would you be okay with your people publishing your financials to your competitors? Because that's what's happening. That's what they're doing. And these companies have no governance. 60% of these companies, 6 out of 10, 3 and 5, have absolutely zero AI governance training. So what does that mean? That means putting the brakes on the freaking car, saying you're not allowed to do this. Because you not only say you can't do this, you also have to audit that. Having a rule that's not enforced is not a rule. So you have to have both of those things. That's what's really happening right here. So I'm still going to go with I have these rules for dealing with AI. I did them a couple years ago. They're pretty popular. And I'm going to go through what I've updated the rules for. Oh, you have to decide what your risk of doing these different systems is. Like what brakes you need to have in there. Sometimes you need the Formula One brakes. Sometimes you don't. So what I think is in most cases, you need to think about governing the agents. Prospective gating, scrub your data before it leaves your network. It's like, what is okay? Your absolute output liability. You are still required. You're being judged by your outputs on what you're putting out with AI. The bot hallucinated. I mean, that's totally like, well, my sister told me that this was okay. No, you can't do that. That's the whole, it's okay. It's like when you're a kid and you're arguing that one of your siblings is allowed to do something. So why can't you? Well, you can't drive a car because you're 12 and she's 16. That is not a defense. So when the bot makes up something, you can't use that as a defense. Maybe that's not quite the right analogy, but I for a long time have thought that the so-and-so said it's okay. It's like, is it okay for you? Personally identifiable information, according to the Hepner case, is a legal waiver. And the public AIs equal you publishing secrets. So, just so you understand that, if you haven't even tried to redact publicly identifiable information from the stuff you put in those systems, that is one of the things the Hepner case said, is you didn't even try to change the name from somebody, John Jane Smith, to 0101. So it's absolutely identifiable and you just put it in there. So my original rule on this was human in the loop. And I still think human in the loop is the gold standard for this, but I think it's kind of been outmoded by the way that people are using the systems. Though I would prefer people to still have human in the loops. I know that and by virtue of you probably listening to this or watching this on YouTube, you probably understand that you aren't doing that. So the next one is building your infrastructure agnostic workflows. You don't want to lock your entire business into one vendor's ecosystem, period. You want to lease the brain, but you want to own the process. If a vendor changes their privacy policy tomorrow, how do you hot swap into another workflow? If you do everything in their particular system and you can't switch to another model, how do you do that? Can you export your data? Do you have backups in your system? Or you like this German professor who I'm not trying to give a hard time to, but their entire stuff for their students was built in there over 2 years. And then when they said, oh, don't share it anymore, because I didn't want to necessarily share it in their system, it deleted everything. There was no backup. There was no way to get it back. You just literally set 2 years of records on fire. What do you do with that? Number 5, trust but verify. Round robin consensus is what I've been using for about 18 months. We have ways to do that in easyprompter.ai if you want to check that out. So it's examine models. When you have high stake outputs, you need to spend more money and time on that. So we're introducing something in easyprompter so that you can actually, we're putting a middle layer in the software itself so that it'll actually remove personal identifiable information. And then we have a way to run it to multiple models and achieve a higher level of consensus on that. That means that we get much more validated workflows. And I don't know of any other system currently in the market that does that. And you want to have inspectable memory. This is the other one that I really think is a massive problem. Inspectable memory, the challenge you run into with a lot of the models right now is when you're using Gemini as a perfect case in point. And it turns out your business partner is also using your same Gemini account. And it memorizes something about you. How do you look and see what it's memorized? The answer is that stuff is really kind of a black box right now. You can't see. Mine got it wrong. I asked it to play devil's advocate about a bakery at some point. And now it drops stuff about cookies into every 5th thing I ask Gemini. Now, I use easyprompter for most things, but I still have a professional Gemini account because I want to have, the thing that's $250, $300 a month, just so I can test, Beanie, the video game 60-second real world generator and things like that. I want to be able to test those things when they come out because they're not always available via the API or advanced programming interface. We can't always put those things in the easyprompter yet, but we want to test the cutting edge of whatever's happening out there to look at it. But you want to be able to inspect the memory in these things. You want to be able to inspect the memory in these systems and make sure that they have the right information. I've never run a bakery. It was just a devil's advocate type project. So what I want to say about this is that you cannot ban shadow AI. You must present a governed alternative. So easyprompter, that's our pitch for our software. It enforces redacts personal identifiable information. If you put it in that mode, it can enforce round robin consensus, and it can route agnostically, so you can choose between the models. Plus, it lets you try out a model and see if you like it. Some people like the flavor of GPT-4, but hated GPT 5.2, or they liked 5.1. At some point, they deprecate or remove those old models, but at least you can try one and find out what you like. It's almost like the death of a friend in some cases. When you find a model you really like the answers you're getting it from. Here's the other thing with the agnosticism and why this is important. When they change something in the model and they act differently, they don't warn you about that. They just change it. And then if you'd really come to rely on it, it can be a real challenge. So the 3 things I want you to look at in your business tomorrow are, number 1, I want you to look at automating friction. Figure out where your administrative bottlenecks are, what you can look and remove in your business. Not necessarily the skilled trade. The thing you get paid to do, don't try to automate that thing away. The thing that you do best in the market, don't try to automate that, because that is your competitive advantage. You want to audit or have a system in place to audit your shadow AI. You want to know what systems you want to know what systems your employees are using to help save time. Don't do this in any kind of parental way where you come down hard on them and they get in trouble or whatever it is. You just want to know. You want them to be honest with you because that's the only way to measure risk. And if you don't have an open environment to foster the application in your company, that is a real challenge. You want to look at building kind of the agnostic model workflow, and that looks at redacting sensitive information locally. Now, what does that mean? That means get something like easyprompter or find another system out there. I don't know another one who does it, but I think it's totally worth looking at. And the big thing I like to tell people to do is start treating your business. This is my thought exercise. If you were starting your company over today based on everything we said, what would you do differently? If you could get rid of all the legacy artifacts, if you could get rid of those, what would you do to move that forward? How would that look different? So this is kind of my challenge to you is how do you architect kind of this 0-day blueprint? It's based on the thought exercise is what would you do now to help your business have a native AI core? How would you automate administrative tasks? Keep all the high value roles and for God's sake, keep oversight on a lot of those roles as you're doing it. when you look at this, it's what should you focus on? I use this in my presentations back in 2024. I think you have to focus on education and training. Your people don't know. Your people don't know. And more importantly, you don't know. You need to go out in the marketplace and you need to find some tools or educate. At the very minimum, you need to start playing with systems. I think you need to set up, if your company's of a large enough size, you need to have an AI guidance team who are tasked with that if you can't do it yourself. I can't tell you the number of business owners I have spoken with in the past 6 months, and the executives are woefully out of touch. Not at the big companies so much, but at a lot of small, medium companies, they are literally living in a delusional world. They're like, you can do X with AI. The hype and grifting is a challenge, not because it's not just going to waste your money, but it's going to burn 6 months of time before you find out that doesn't work. Start building toasters. Start making lots of toast and making it in a very efficient way every single time. You need to have your policies and general principles in writing with these systems. And by the way, those need to be reviewed by an attorney. A lot of business owners I talk to right now are like, I'll have my new contract drafted by GPT. Great. That's not a bad first draft. Send an attorney, pay someone money to evaluate that. You don't know enough to know what you don't know. You need to look in the hands of a smart professional. The AI is a gift. It can save them time. It might, I didn't need to generate this boilerplate, but I still need to review it. Would you trust a paralegal to write something that you didn't yourself review if you're an attorney? The answer is that's a malpractice lawsuit waiting to happen. You need to have team impact assessments. You have to figure out in your organization, how this can affect different people in there. And you need to build out a roadmap for the future. So you need to build out an AI roadmap for your company where you want to be. You cannot hit a moving object by shooting it where it is now. You need to look and project yourself in the future. Now, by the way, a lot of people have told me, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's coming around the corner. You can make predictions. If you're driving down a road in the mountains, you can predict certain things. There might be deer up ahead. There might be a person walking the road. You're probably not going to have an alien spaceship land in front of you and take you off into space. So stop lying to yourself. You can predict a lot of things. Maybe not with 100% confidence, but you can predict where you're looking at and where you're going. And I want you to keep in mind that I think having the team suggest their own guardrails at the initial steps, you need to explain to them or hire somebody like me. You want to hire somebody or let the team suggest their own guardrail. It helps with adoption. And by the way, adoption is the enemy of everything else right now. If you go and give it to your people, already in America, as I've said, people are rebelling against artificial intelligence to some extent. You need to soften the blow. The buck stops with you. You are responsible for how that works. Don't make excuses for it. Don't chase shiny objects. That happens a lot. It's not that you wasted money on chasing the shiny object. It's that you wasted the time and you wasted the energy. You're moving too fast in some respects. Also, if it sounds too good to be true, if somebody says, the new AI, you don't have to go to work anymore. There are a couple of these cottage companies out there right now that supposedly will have the AI build out the entire company for you while you sleep. It'll come up with a company idea and execute everything, and they're making a lot of money. First of all, why is that valuable? Because everybody would do it if you could. I'm not saying those companies, I'm investigating a couple of those right now. I do not believe they're really going to be around in the long run. I think it's this kind of holy grail. It's a fool's errand. If everybody could have the AI doing everything for you right now, wouldn't we already be there or be closer to it? I'm not saying there isn't some value in these things. You can automate little things in your company. There's the idea of this company running everything on your own. You're not involved. That sounds like a dream. I don't think we're there. I don't even think we're close. You don't have time to wait. The gains you build today will matter the most this month. You want to encourage honesty with your teams and be open to use cases, but let the buyer beware. Almost 70% are shadow AI users right now. So you want to look at what's called considered economically valuable activities. I usually talk about these as quick wins, the low effort, high impact. I'll talk about that more in the next episode. But the idea is that it's do the things right now that are worth the money, that take away friction. You want to put somebody who's practiced in the area that has competency. Do not say, oh yeah, Fred over here definitely could. I know he's just done the following for us before. He's never worked in marketing, but with AI, he could be a superpowered marketer. Absolutely not. The people need to have competency so they know what they're overseeing. There's two parts there, human in the loop. How do you know to judge the outcomes to go forward or not? And the AIs have gotten very, very good at sounding incredibly confident in their answers when they are woefully wrong. I'm an attorney. I have gotten people sending me fully drafted out, well thought out, reasoned opinions that are dead wrong on something that took me 4 hours to produce and send over to people. I know you did not send me your bullet point analysis of what I wrote out to you and researched in 30 minutes. The things it said were absolutely incorrect, but they sounded good on the surface, but you didn't know what you're doing with it? You would have totally, that sounds great. If I had given that advice to a client, you would have taken it. You would have been like, oh, my lawyer said this, but I also have malpractice insurance, right? So there are liabilities for me. If you get it from an AI, good luck. It's the only technology in history that will confidently cheer you on as it drives you right off a cliff all the way until you hit the ground below. It seems like we went off the cliff here. Yeah, I know, but it turns out we're going in the right direction. We'll end up where we're trying to get to soon. That is not to scare people, but without guardrails, that can absolutely happen. You want to look for low-hanging, non-critical fruit. Remember, you cannot survive the crash if you're a small and medium-sized business. You don't have time to wait. You need to do this now. Pay for the tools. If it's $50, if it's $100, if it's $500 a month, it is cheaper than any employee in your organization. Any employee. You want to require oversight. You want to map out kind of critical areas. Just some quick wins for people. These are things I don't think this has changed. Quick wins could save every office worker 25% of their time. Sales calls, proposal generation, it can cut your time by 75%. You still have to have somebody overview it. Meetings each week. Just have it record your meetings and then transcribe them and then use that. Summary. Don't spend that. I'm using it to record a lot of my meetings right now just so I can be more present in the meeting. I still have my notepad and I still doodle on it or draw on it or have my tablet that I'm writing on. I still use that because it helps me put mental markers in my own memory. But then I'm not going back later and trying to read my handwriting, which is not the best in the world. So that's where it can save real time. Emails, people spend 2 hours on email a day. I can cut the time by 75%. Drafting meeting notes and memos saves time by 75%. And the whole thing, the reason why this is so valuable to your business, especially like in a sales call role, if you can get your proposal out, the most important thing you can do is speed to impact. The most likely accepted proposals are either the first one they see or the last one they see. It's very hard to predict if you are going to be the last proposal they see. But the first proposal they see, that is something that is achievable. Getting it out the door faster and in the client's hands. And so that's where that basically brings us to the end of this talk. It's about looking at the road ahead, predicting where you're going, and realize that you need to be building toasters right now, but you need to be governing them and making sure they don't have shorts and they don't bring your house down. I think the future with artificial intelligence can be very, very bright if properly applied. Stop chasing shiny objects and quite literally start going out there and building systems that are going to allow you to really dominate on things that are your unique competitive advantage. Don't ever, ever, ever automate away your unique selling point. If you do that, then why do they need you? So that brings you to the end of another episode of The Buck Stops Here, our special talks edition. I'll be doing a lot more of these. Every time I do a talk, I'll be trying to wrap this into an episode of The Buck Stops Here. I would like to do that and control that just so I can let all this work I put into every talk, because they're never the same, I'd like to make that available to the audience. Again, if you want to check more about me, you can go to davidmaples.com. And as always, the Buck Stops Here podcast is available for you to look at online, or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you enjoy good podcasts. You can also check out our channel on YouTube. So with that, go out there, do good work, and have a great week.